obviously I'm here to talk about my son's traumatic brain injury, but I'm going to just back up and kind of talk about like his pregnancy and my older son's pregnancy, just to kind of, it flows into like what happened to him, and it
gives a good background.
Yeah, and it affects kind of like later on in the story. Okay, so me and my husband were together. We got together, and then early on in our relationship, I got pregnant with my first son. And it was kind of weird because I didn't know until about like halfway through the pregnancy, because I had no symptoms leading up to it. No morning sickness, no weight gain, like nothing. So it was like one day I was like laying in bed and I like had my hand like resting on my stomach, and it felt kind of hard. And I was like, that's not normal. So I was like looking it up and like asked, he was my boyfriend at the time, but he's now my husband. And I was like, this feels weird. Like, could this be? And he's like, I don't know. So I was like looking it up.
But your stomach didn't like look any bigger. Just
no,
felt
it
hard.
didn't. Literally, I didn't look bloated. Nothing. Like no weight gain that I could like notice.
Right.
It just felt like a hard lump.
Okay.
So I was like looking it up, and it was like, could be pregnancy. And I'm like, there's no way. I was on birth control too.
Wow.
And like I said, no symptoms at all. And I was like, okay. I'm like, well, for shits and giggles, let's just go to Walmart, grab some tests, and we'll see if we're pregnant. And so we did. It was like the middle of the night. And in my mind, I'm like, there's no way I'm pregnant. Like, I'm on birth control, no symptoms. Like, I can't be pregnant. So we get home, and I take the first test, and it like lit up like a Christmas tree, like immediately. And I'm like, no. It's wrong. It's a false positive. Like, there's no way.
And in your mind, you probably thought, okay, I can't be that far along.
No,
either,
not
right?
at all. So I'm like, what the hell? Because like with the birth control, like I lost my period, so I like didn't have one, so it's not like I could tell her or anything. So I take a second one, because I think we bought 3. So I take a second one, and same thing, it's positive. And this is like late at night, so I'm like, I'm like, everything online says that you get a more accurate reading in the morning because of all like the pregnancy hormones, like they build up over the night and then you can test. So I'm like, let me just do it in the morning, but still I'm like, I can't be pregnant. So I wake up in the morning, I take the test, and same thing, it comes back positive. And I was like, okay, like now I need to go to the doctor and figure this out, because when did this happen? Like, how, like, I'm on birth control. This is supposed to be like a preventative thing. So I was like really nervous. And I didn't want to tell anyone right away because I was just like so much like, I don't know what's going on. So I went to Planned Parenthood just because like they were right there and they were free and I could just go in real quick. So I did, and I let them know what happened. I'm like, look, they're like, okay, well, when's the day of like your last period? And I was like, I don't know, I'm on birth control. It went away. So like, okay, let's do an ultrasound. Or they confirmed my pregnancy with a test. They're like, okay, you are pregnant. Now let's figure out how far along you are. So they did an ultrasound, and I think it was like 1 or 2 techs did it, and one of them said I was like 8 weeks along, which that's pretty early. So I'm like, okay. And then the other one's like, wait, let me go check again. She's like, you're looking like you're a little bit further along, maybe around 12 weeks. So I'm like, okay. And they're like, yeah, like what's your next step? Because like, obviously they're not an OBGYN. So I'm like, okay, like, let me go tell my family, because I had no idea. I was 21 years old in a pretty new relationship. Like, I was in my last year of college. So like, I wasn't prepared to like be pregnant and have a baby. So I was like, okay, now I have to tell my family and we gotta figure this out. So I told my mom first, and she's like, okay, well, have you seen a doctor? And I'm like, no. So she's like, okay, let me go bring you to like where I go for my OBGYN. And so, or like, yeah. So that's where she did. So we got an appointment, because she asked all the questions they asked there. She's like, well, how far along are you? When did this happen? I'm like, I have no idea. So we get in there like right away, and I don't know if they have like more like advanced technology there or whatnot, but the doctor's there, the ultrasound tech there, she's like, you're measuring around 23 weeks. So she's like, you're more than halfway through the pregnancy. And I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, she's like, yeah, she's like, this is, and she showed me everything. She's like, yeah, so yeah, like, let's start taking care of you, making appointments. Like, you're going to have to come, like, every 2 weeks and all that. And I was like, okay, like, this is what we're going to do. So instead of having, like, the whole 9 months to prepare, I found out, I found it in late December. And he was born the beginning of May. So I had, like, about 4 months to prepare.
So in that 4 months, did your belly start to grow?
I didn't start showing till I was about, like, 30 weeks.
Because I was going to say, like, if you didn't even think
and when I stepped on the
it,
scale at the doctor, I had only gained, it was like 5 pounds. But it wasn't something where I'm like, okay, like, that's a crazy amount of weight.
Right.
Like, oh my God. And I didn't have any weight, like, it wasn't showing anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't showing in my stomach. My stomach felt fine except for, like, that
lump,
little, like, bump. Not even a bump. It was just, like, a hard spot.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like, just like when you're bloated or something.
Right. That reminds me of the show I didn't know I was pregnant. Have you seen that?
That's exactly what I was like, oh my God, it could have been on this damn show. Like,
right.
But
crazy.
No, it was, I'm like, this is not, like, I've never heard of this happening, especially, like, I was like, you never expect it to be you.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And I was like, not at a point in my life where I thought I could take care of a baby. Like, you know, I was with my boyfriend for,
you were still young.
Yeah, I was in my last year of college. I had plans to go. I was going to be a teacher. I was, like, doing student teaching. I'm like, oh my God, like, I was, like, so scared and nervous. And I just took those 4 months to just kind of prepare myself and do everything that I should be doing. And I had a lot of help from, like, my friends and family. Like, they're all supportive and they all helped, like, really well. So that made it a lot easier for me. So yeah, the rest of the pregnancy, and even so, like, my second appointment there. So the first appointment, they confirmed, yes, you're pregnant and you're more than halfway through. Second appointment, they're like, okay, we can tell you the gender. So it wasn't even like a week after I found out I was pregnant. Fast. They're like, oh yeah, you're having a boy. And I was like, oh crap, okay. Like, now I can just, I don't have to guess or sit there and wonder what I'm going to have. So that was kind of cool. So yeah, the next 4 months, like, flew by. Towards the end, I had to do it's like a non-stress test. So they put, like, a monitor on your belly for, like, a half an hour. Like, you come in, like, once a week and they'll put a monitor on you and just check the movement, because they said something about, like, his growth. They're like, his chest is growing slower than his head or something. Like, that's what the measurements were telling them. So we're just going to monitor you for a little bit, but nothing serious. It's just protocol. So they did that. Nothing came about. He moved fine. Everything was good. But they're like, just because of that, we're going to induce you towards the end of your pregnancy, just because we don't really know where it started. Like the beginning of your pregnancy, it's kind of like a gray area. We don't know when it really happened. We think it's, like, in this time frame. So we know you're gonna be full term at this point. So we're gonna induce you. So that's what they did, and the labor and delivery was super normal. It was quick, like, I don't know. Like, I didn't know what to expect because I couldn't compare it to anything, but it was very normal. He came out normal, no complications. And yeah, so that was my first pregnancy. So super just, like, non-conventional, like here's a baby, like,
right.
That's how it felt. So that was my older son. And now my second son, the one who had the accident, his pregnancy was, although it was, like, completely normal the whole way through, it was very different how I found out. So when it happened, like, it was almost like I knew immediately. I don't know what it was, but I'm like, I was, like, sitting there, I'm like, I think I'm pregnant. And it was even before my missed period, because at that point I was off birth control just because I'm like, it's not working, clearly. I got pregnant off of it. Like, I don't trust it. So I went off of it.
And how far apart were the pregnancies?
So they're 21 months apart. Okay. So it was right after my oldest son's first birthday.
Got it.
So yeah, it was, like, right after his first birthday, I found out I was pregnant. So yeah, I found out, like, even before my missed period, which was nuts. And it came back positive, which usually it doesn't. It's usually, like, after the fact.
Yeah.
So I was actually like, what's the word? I was, like, surprised it came back, like, positive. So I'm like, oh my God. So it was kind of like a different feeling, because it's like I had all this time to prepare for him to come, and it wasn't just, like, sprung upon me. And, I had already had a child. So I was like, okay, like, this is the second time around. It'll be easier.
I got this.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so the whole pregnancy, went by like fast. It was no complications. We went to the 20-week anatomy scan. Everything was normal. They told us we were having a boy then, so I was gonna have 2 boys and just be outnumbered. So that whole pregnancy was normal. And labor and delivery, same thing. I was induced then too because I made it to the 41-week mark. And at that OBGYN that I went to, they're like, if you make it to 41 weeks, it's not really safe for you or baby to go past that, so we'll induce you in case you get that far. So I made it to 41 weeks, and labor and delivery, again, super normal, no complications, like everything was good. So then fast forward to around when he was like 4 months old, is like when they start like holding their bottles on their own. And I noticed that when he was holding it, with his right hand, he'd cup the bottle like you normally would, but his left hand, he'd hold it in a fist. And that's how he would always hold it. So I'd look at it and be like, okay, like that's kind of weird. So I'd like go over and like undo his fingers, and it was almost like there was like tension there. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it doesn't feel like natural that he's opening his fingers right now. But I'd open them and they stay like that. So I'm like, okay, like I'll keep an eye on it, but that's kind of weird. So I remember at his next doctor's appointment, I let the doctor know, and I was like, hey, like, I've noticed him doing this when he's holding his bottle. Like, is that normal? And he just kind of was like, no, like, he's fine. He's still young. Just keep an eye on it. If it worsens or you've noticed more, like, just let us know and we'll figure it out. But that's all I got from that appointment. I think that was, like, his 6-month appointment. So with that was, like, the only concern I had seen then. But he was hitting all of his other milestones. So, like, he sat up when he was supposed to. He crawled when he was supposed to. He walked at 1 year old, like when they're supposed to. So it's like he was hitting all these milestones and everything was going great. Like nothing was concerning besides that left hand. And it was just like constant thing. So like when he would start crawling, it was like his right hand was like flat on the ground. And then his left, not like all of the time, but I would say majority of the time was like in a fist, and he'd like, crawl like that. And then once he was like 1, I did start to notice like he'd hold his arm like close to his chest, and like it's almost like he had a hard time extending his arm fully. Like I said, with the tension with his fingers, it was like there was tension like in his elbow and shoulder area, and he just like wouldn't use it. Like he'd use his right hand for literally everything. And I know like babies, they're not supposed to have like a dominant hand until they become like a toddler, and that's where you distinguish like if you're a lefty or righty. So I'm like, it's just like, it's not normal. So I remember bringing it up like at his 1 year appointment, and still the doctor's like, he's like, oh, I don't know. Like it, he seems fine. Like he's hitting all his milestones like you're saying, and you don't see any other concerns. Maybe it'll correct itself. He's still young. And in my head, like, I'm like, okay. Cause like I haven't had like nothing. Like my first son, like I've had no like medical problems, like no health issues. And up until this point, like nothing, like I hadn't had to really deal with anything like abnormal like that. And like I was young, like at this time I was 23 or 24. And I just kind of put like all my trust in the doctors. I'm like, they're the professionals. They know what's best. I'm going to listen to what they say. And I guess we'll just go with it. So then a few months go by, and I'm still just noticing like he's not moving his left hand like he should be. So I'm like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to do my own research and try to figure this out, and really just try to like push for like what's going on, because as a mom, I'm like, this is not normal.
You have the instinct,
Yeah. So I'm like, let me look stuff up. And the doctors tell you all the time, they're like, don't Google anything. They're like, if you have a concern, call us. But I'm like, I've been telling you this at every single appointment, and you're dismissing it like it's nothing. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. Like, what's gonna happen? So I'm like one of those people, like on Google, I type in like very specific, like everything verbatim what I see. So hopefully I can get like a very accurate like answer. So that's exactly what I wrote. I typed in something like left hand in a balled fist and tight against body, something like that. And a bunch of stuff popped up, and like one of the first articles I saw was this mom, and it was a blog about her daughter, and she had pictures of her daughter, and I believe it was her right side, But she had pictures of her daughter with her arm the same exact way and everything. And so I kept reading, and she's like, yeah, when she was this old, I noticed her hand was in a fist. It's like I was reading like what was going on in my life. So she's like, her hand was in a fist. She wouldn't open it up. It was tight to her body. And then she's like, our doctor referred us to, I don't know if it was like right away, but like they referred her to a neurologist. Mm-hmm. And the neurologist was like, yeah, she had a prenatal stroke and it caused her to have cerebral palsy. And that's what's happening. And we just like, for whatever reason, they like don't catch it before you give birth. I think it happens like either right before birth. It can happen either right before or during birth. So it's not like they can catch it like weeks before, unless it happened weeks before. So
it still is surprising though, because even though he was hitting his marks technically, you would think that if something was abnormal, you know what I mean? Like if you don't typically see something and then you see it, that you would at least look further into it. That's I think,
and that's a
parent's mindset.
Yeah, and I like beat myself up all the time because I'm like, I should have just, said something sooner. I should have pushed for like a second opinion. I shouldn't have put like all my trust into this one doctor and be like, okay.
Most people do.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're like taught to do.
Exactly. And like with the Google thing, like don't Google anything. Just call us and we'll figure it out. But it's like, what happens if it's an emergency? You know what I mean?
I also think if something's rare, you know what I mean? Or if it's not something that's like the norm where it's happening all the time or it's common, I think that doctors, and I mean, I've had people on the show before that have, testified for that as well. Like, I feel like they don't push for it or they don't really want to investigate it because they don't have enough
paperwork, more
that
work to
they
do.
might just, and they might just not have enough knowledge around it. It might not seem serious to them because everything else looks fine.
Yeah.
But
So I just kept reading her blog, and it was like I was literally like reading what was happening in my life. So I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, could this have had happened to him? And I'm like, it couldn't be. I'm like, there would be more signs. There would be, and like when I first heard the word cerebral palsy, like before I knew more about it, all I pictured, and I don't know if this was like naive of me, but like all I pictured was like people in wheelchairs, people who can't speak, people who need like 24-hour care and support. Like I didn't realize that it's a whole like spectrum of things. Like there can be severe and mild. Like had no idea.
I didn't know either.
So I kept reading her thing, and I'm like, could this be what my son has? So I remember my husband came home from work that day, and I told him, I was like, hey, I looked this up, and this is like exactly what's going on. Like, do you think this is possible? And he's like, I don't think so, but he's like, doesn't hurt to ask. So I remember at my son's his 18-month appointment, so 1.5, I told the doctor, I was like, look, I did my own research. This is what I found. I saw like a case very similar to his, and they were explaining that their daughter had a prenatal stroke and she has cerebral palsy and this and this and this. And he immediately like threw his hands up. He's like, no, he's like, your son does not have that. You're fine. Like he does not have that. We would have known way before this point. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, I want a referral to someone because I need to figure this out. Like, it's going to drive me nuts. I'm like, please send me somewhere. Like, I need to figure this out. So we're up in New Hampshire, and we're not even an hour from Boston Children's Hospital, which is one of like the best children's hospitals in the country. So he was like, okay, well, he's like, do you want to drive to Boston or do you want someone local? And so since Boston Children's has such a really good like what's the word? Like a good reputation. I was like, just send me there. I know that the best of the best doctors are there. I'll get the care that we need. Because clearly I'm not getting it here. I didn't say that to him, but that's how I felt. So he's like, okay. So he's like, I'm going to refer you to this orthopedic doctor at Boston. And in my mind, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with his bones. I'm like, I've felt around, like everything feels fine, like nothing. Like you look at his hand and like, it's just like, he holds it differently, but like his bone, like if you feel around, nothing feels abnormal. But I didn't say anything. I was like, as long as I have a referral to somewhere, like
Yeah.
I can, get my foot in the door and we can, get this started. So he's like, okay, yeah, that's fine. So so I said that was like a year and a half. I don't know. Was it a year and a half? It was a year and a half. So between like year and a half and 2 years old, is when we started going to children's, and we saw the orthopedic doctor. Very nice. I explained to him what was going on. And I was like, this is what his pediatrician referred us to. He's like, okay, let's take a look. So we did some x-rays, and then he came back. He's like, x-rays look really good. He's like, I don't see anything wrong with his bones. He said there was like a mild curvature, like right here. But he's like, it doesn't look like it's like crazy abnormal or it will affect him in any way. But he's like, his bones are healthy. They're normal. He's like, I'm wondering if it's something more neurological or muscular. And that's, in my mind, that's what I was thinking. Mm-hmm. So he's like, I'm going to refer you to this other doctor. She's a neuromuscular doctor. I think that's what she was. He's like, I really think it's something to do with like his nerves or his muscle or something.
Did you tell anyone at this hospital about the blog that you saw, or not yet?
No, I didn't. No, because I wanted their honest opinion. Right. I didn't want to, obviously, I wouldn't be putting like things into a doctor's head like, well, this is what I researched, and they'd be like, oh yeah, maybe you're right. Like they have their own knowledge to base it off of. So I just wanted to go in there with a blank slate and see what they say. So a few weeks later go by, and this is probably very beginning of 2020. So this is like January, February, because it was around where he turned 2, because he turned 2 in February. So it was like right before that weird time. Or that time. So we meet with the neuromuscular doctor, and I explained everything that was going on with him, holding his hand in a fist, tight to his body. So she's like, okay, let's have him run down the hallway, give high fives, have him do some two-handed activities. That's like really big. And we were there for probably a half an hour. And after that half hour, we were getting ready to like kind of wrap things up. And she's like, I can't say 100% or like with 100% guarantee, but she's like, I am like 99% sure he's showing signs of having cerebral palsy. And I just sat there and like, it felt like this giant weight like lifted off my shoulders, because she was like the first person to like acknowledge it and tell me like face to face, like, hey, this is something serious, and I think this is what he has. And I'm like, like the emotions I felt, I was just like, oh my God, like, it sucks hearing that something could potentially be wrong with your child, but I'm like, I'm getting answers. So now we can go forward and we can figure out what the next step is. So she's like, I can't guarantee it. She's like, what would guarantee it is getting an MRI. So let's schedule an MRI, and that will tell us all the things we need to know. So I was like, okay, cool. So like I said, this was like February 2020, and we scheduled it it was like late March 2020. And that's like a huge part in this story. So so we scheduled the MRI, and then she's like, it's not like a life or death thing, or, just keep an eye on what he's doing. Just live your life, and then we'll do the MRI, and then we'll go from there. So we scheduled that. And then fast forward to the middle of March 2020, COVID happens. They shut the world down, like right in the middle of March, like a week before his MRI. So they call me, like the hospital calls me, and they're like, hey, we don't know what's going on like in the world right now with COVID. Because at that point, nobody knew what was going on. Right. They were like, there's an outbreak of something, so we're shutting the world down, and we're going to shut it down for like a week or two, and then we'll go about our business. So they're like, we're only taking in like serious cases right now. Like, we have to reschedule your MRI just because it's not like an emergency case. Excuse me. It's not an emergency case. We're only taking in like really sick patients right now, and we don't want to risk a healthy person coming to the hospital and getting sick. So I was like, oh, okay. So they're like, we don't know when that's going to be, so let's hold off on rescheduling and picking a date. But when everything settles down, we'll figure it out. So I was like, okay, like, you know, I can deal with that. Because in my mind, I had already accepted. I'm like, there's in my mind 100% this is what happened, or this is what he has. Now we just need to figure out what happened to cause it and how we're gonna go about it.
So did they say anything about that they were worried about it progressing or anything like that? Or
And I wrote it down.
Sorry, if I'm jumping ahead.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I wrote down the definition of cerebral palsy.
Okay.
It's a congenital disorder of movement, muscle tone, or posture. And what that means is it happens right before birth or during birth.
Okay.
So like in that time frame, that's when it's caused. So it's like a lack of oxygen to the brain, and it causes part of the brain to not develop fully.
Okay.
So that's what causes the cerebral palsy, or CP. I'll probably just call it CP from now on, just because it's easier. And so when I did meet with the woman, when I met with the neuromuscular doctor, she had told me, she's like, because like obviously she couldn't 100% be like, this is what he has, but she's like, just in case he has this, CP is not a progressive disorder. So whatever symptoms he has right now, they will not get worse as he gets older.
Interesting.
It doesn't go downhill from here. It can only go up with therapies and all of these resources. So she's like, you know, this is our starting point, and we can just go up from here.
Okay.
So that was like really good to hear, because like when I heard that too, I was like, oh my God, like is it going to get worse? Is he going to be in the wheelchair like what I'm thinking? Is he going to not speak? Like, he was 2 years old, so like he wasn't really speaking at that point, just kind of like words here and there. So I'm like, oh my God, are we just going to go?
Right, like you didn't have like enough knowledge on it.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Like I said, like all I thought was like he's just going to, or people with CP are in wheelchairs, and that's just what I thought. So yeah, it's not a progressive disorder. However you're born, like I said, when I tell people about it and talk about it, I compare it to autism. It's like a very wide spectrum. It can be, so like my son, for instance, he has a very mild case of CP. And then there's also people who have very severe cases. And those are the people who need care and support from other people, like all the time. So yeah, it's almost like autism. So it's very like, it's either you're on one side or the other, or somewhere in between. Yeah. Like that's how I explain it. Yeah. So that's what she told us about that.
Mm-hmm. And then I think you were at the world shutting down.
Yes. So COVID happened. It's the end of March. They call me and they're like, we're only taking in sick patients right now. We don't want to risk healthy people getting sick. So we're going to hold off on rescheduling this because we don't know what's going on. Because I remember that time, and they're like, we're going to shut the world down for 2 weeks, and then that will fix the problem, and we'll go back to our normal lives. That's what it seemed like at the time. So I'm like, okay, like it won't be that long. And like
another week or two.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not a progressive thing, so it's not like things were getting worse.
Yeah.
I would, they're like, if anything, just, help him use his left hand more in the meantime, So that's what we did. And then it was the very end of March, and my husband, he works in the union. His company had said, hey, what's going on in the world right now is pretty serious. We're going to give all you guys a 2-week layoff, mandatory layoff. So don't come in here for 2 weeks. We'll call you, and then we'll be back to work probably. So like take the 2 weeks, be with your family, do what you got to do. But this is like getting more serious. So this is what we're going to do. So we're up in New Hampshire, and my husband is from the South, and his family is all over the South. So at the time, his parents were in Texas. And so he's like, hey, we never get to see my parents very much. Why don't we take a trip to Texas for like a week and like visit them, and then we'll come back. I'll go back to work, and let's make a trip out of this. What's the word? Not unemployment. What did I say? Layoff.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, let's take advantage of this layoff and go visit my family. And like, I love his parents to death. Like, just very, very like Southern hospitality. So I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, why not? Like, I'm a Sagittarius, so I'm very spontaneous, and I like to travel. So like, I was like, sure, why not? Like, I just go with the flow.
Yeah.
Like, let's just go. So we got plane tickets, and that was the last day of March, so March 31st. And it was actually pretty cool because on the plane ride there, since like COVID was like a thing, there was no one at the airport. Right. So it was me, my husband, and our 2 boys. And I think there was like 1 guy on like a business trip. Mm-hmm. We were the only ones on the plane.
It's wild.
And the flight attendants were like, yeah, like the kids can obviously not run around, but they're like, they can sit anywhere they want. That's cool. You can pick any seat. Like nobody else is coming here. Like might as well, you know? Mm-hmm. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, we get to Texas. His parents are very chill. So like, let's go get some food. We'll go back to the house. They have a pool. They're like, let's chill in the pool, you know, let's just relax. They're like, all the stuff that's happening in the world right now is craziness. So let's just kind of, you know, chill out, enjoy your time here, you know, like let's just make a time out of it. So we get to March 31st and everything's fine. So then the next day is when the accident happened, but we didn't know it happened that day. So that's April 1st. I was out grocery shopping with my mother-in-law, and my husband was at home with the kids and my father-in-law. And so it's my father-in-law's grandmother was living with them. So it's my husband's great-grandma and then my kid's great-great-grandma. So she's like a little old lady. And they're like, oh, yeah, this is Granny. She's living with us. Because I had never met her before. So she's living there. So she's there with them. And they're just like playing with her and all that. So I get back from grocery shopping with my mother-in-law. And we walk in and my husband was on the couch and he had our son just like resting on him. Like that's normal. He was just napping. He's like, hey, he's like, while you were gone, he had fallen. There was like their staircase, and right next to the staircase is the living room. So my husband was like right there and he's like, yeah, I heard him fall and it was like right on the bottom step. And he's like, I thought he may have like broken his arm because he was holding his arm or something. And it sounded like he like hit like a bone or something. He's like, but I checked him, you know, like he cried for like a minute, like his normal cry. And then he was fine. Like he cried for a minute, he got up and was fine. And now he's, you know, just laying on me. And he's like, yeah, I checked everything was fine. And he snapped back like he normally does. So I'm like, okay, like didn't think anything of it. Like kids fall all the time. From what he had said, it wasn't like dramatic. Like, oh my God, he tumbled down the stairs. Right. He's like, he was just at the bottom step and it looked like, it sounded like he had just like maybe taken a step or tried to take a step and he had fallen. But he's like, I was right there. And he's like, he cried for a minute and then was good. So like I said, especially boys, they will get hurt all the time. They are crazy. So that was just normal. So we're like, okay, like he's fine. And I just shoved it to the back of my mind. Yeah. Like I said, it happened. They fall all the time. They cry and they get back up and you're good. So we go about our day. We eat lunch. We have dinner, go to bed. The boys went to bed. And then I remember my husband and I were like, oh, we're going to go sit out in the hot tub for a minute. So I let my mother-in-law know. I'm like, if either of them get up, like, because it was normal for them to like get up and be like, oh, I want to go lay with mom and dad. I'm like, if any of them get up, I was like, I have my phone, just like shoot me a text and we'll come right back in. I even think we had like a baby monitor outside with us because they were just right upstairs. And she's like, yeah, and her room was right next to theirs too, so it's not like we were just leaving them there. So we were out there for probably like 5 minutes, and he started crying. My youngest son who fell, he started crying. My mother-in-law texted me and she's like, hey, he's not calming down. Could you please come in? So I was like, okay, sure. Sometimes he just wants his mom or his dad, and so she hands him over to me. We get inside. She hands him over to me, and he's crying. And then I just, like I said, it's kind of normal. I just calm him down. And after he calms down and we're like laying in bed, I turned to my husband and I was like, this doesn't sound like his normal cry. I'm like, it sounds like he's in pain. And so my husband, and I don't fault him for this at all, but he was like, we traveled yesterday. We're in a new place. We did a lot today. We went swimming, a lot of new things. Maybe it's just like being in a new environment. He could be just like really tired or stressed out. Like maybe that's it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, you know what? Like maybe that is it. I felt the same way. I'm like, okay, like I'm exhausted. So I'm sure he is too. But I was just like, the sound, it just doesn't sound right to me. Because, like, you know, as a mom, like, you know their cries. You know when they're hungry. You know when they're upset. You know when they need to be changed. Like, it comes natural to you. And so that was just like another time where I was like, I just should have listened to myself. But I'm like, you know what, maybe he's right. Like, you know, it's been a long day. So, yeah. So, he went to bed that night. He slept in the bed with us perfectly fine, slept the whole night, woke up fine, because he'd always wake up before us. So then he woke up fine. And I remember we went about our day. We had breakfast, and I remember after breakfast, the kids wanted to go play in the pool. And like I said, we had nothing to do, so we're like, sure, why not? It was like 9:30 in the morning. So we're like, okay, why not? So we go in the pool, and I remember our youngest son, he found out, like, he couldn't swim on his own, obviously. He had, like, the little floaties. But we showed him how he could run and jump into the pool into our arms, and, like, he loved it. And, like, he's, like, my active one. Like, he is just go, go, go all the time. Mm-hmm. So it was, like, the funniest thing. He just kept running and, like, jumping into our arms. Like, he did that for, like, 20 minutes. And just, like, laughing and having a good time. Like, everything, we were just, you know, being our normal selves, like, having fun. So later in the day, it was, like, later in the morning, early afternoon maybe. No, it wasn't early afternoon, excuse me. It was late morning. And he still took naps, my son. So he fell asleep on the couch upstairs, because it was like a loft area, and then it was the downstairs. So he fell asleep up there on the couch. And my husband was like, hey, me and my dad are going to go grab some lunch. I'm going to go with him, and then we'll be right back. So I was like, okay. So I don't know what I did, but, like, he fell asleep on the couch. I'm like, I'm going to go. I don't even know what I was doing. I was just like, I'm just going to go get some chores done or do something. Like, he'll let him take his nap. I'm not going to move him. He looks comfortable. And so, and, like, the couch, it was just like a normal couch. It was a carpet like this. And I put, like, an ottoman there, so, like, in case he did roll, like, nothing would happen. Like, it wasn't like he'd be falling to, like, hardwood floor and, like, hurt himself. Like, he was safe. Like, I felt comfortable just leaving him there. So I might have just been, like, going downstairs, because my other son was down there, and I was just, like, hanging out with him. And then I remember going to do the dishes, and I heard my son crying upstairs. And so I was like, okay, let me go grab him. So I stopped what I'm doing, and I go up there, and, like, it looked like he had rolled off of the couch, but, like, only, like, his lower half of his body. His body was, like, on the ground, like, he was on his knees, and his upper body was, like, resting on the couch. And he was, like, crying. So I went over to him, and I pick him up, and I'm like, okay, like, he still seems tired. Let me go try to put him back to sleep, maybe in our bed. I go into our room, and I go to lay down with him, and so he's 2 at the time, so he's still little. So I'm holding him on my chest, and I'm just, like, rubbing his back, and he quiets down, and I'm, like, rubbing his back, and I'm like, his skin feels really cold and clammy. And I'm like, what the hell? So I, like, look down, and, like, his skin is, like, discolored. Like, he almost looks like he's, like, gray. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like, is he breathing? So I rested my hand on his back, and it was, like, so slow, and his heartbeat was slow too, like, really slow. And I'm like, oh my God, he's not breathing. So I try, like, waking him up, and, like, he'd raise his head. Not even opening his eyes, he'd cry for a minute, and then his head would go down. So I'm like, holy shit, like, we need to get help. So I'm panicking. So I jump up, I grab my phone, and I call my husband. I'm like, I don't even say hi, hello, nothing. I'm like, you need to get back here now. We need to bring him to the hospital. Something is wrong. And I hang up. I'm like, and that's it. I just left it at that. I'm like, maybe he'll take that as, like, this is an emergency. Like, get the fuck back here. So I screamed down the stairs for my mother-in-law. I was like, something is wrong. He's not breathing. Like, what do I do? And so obviously, like, she's coming from, like, doing whatever. And so she's like, oh, like, what's wrong? And I'm like, he's not breathing. Like, we need help. We need to go to the hospital. So she's like, okay, like, let's calm down. Let me see him. So she takes him, and she's like, oh, okay. And I don't even know if, like, she saw, like, what I saw, but I think she was just trying to, like, be the calm person in the situation. Because I was like, we need to go. Like, there's an emergency. And she's like, okay, like, let's figure this out. Like, let's take a step back and, like, look. So she takes him from me. She's like, let's go next door, because the next door neighbor, she's a retired pediatrician. She's like, let's see if she has, like, any advice. Like, Because at this point I have 911 like ready to call, or I'm like, we either need to do that or go to the hospital ourselves, because the hospital from their house was like a 5-minute drive, like not far at all. So I knew we could get there really fast. And I figured we could get there faster than calling an ambulance and waiting for them. Right. So she still has him. She's like, let's go next door and ask her, the pediatrician, what she thinks. So we walk outside, and just as we're walking outside, the neighbor's husband was like on a bike ride, and he walks up and he like takes one look at us, and he's like, hey, like what's up? She's like, hey, like, do you mind just grabbing your wife? Like, we just want to ask her a question about her son. He's like, yeah, sure. So he like runs in, and she comes out. She's like eating her lunch. She's like, hey, what's up? And my mother-in-law's like, hey, like, what's your opinion? Like, does he look okay? Like, do we need to bring him to the hospital? And she took one look at him, and she's like, I don't like the way he looks. You need to get him to a hospital immediately. Like, she's like, yeah. She's like, nope, I do not like the way he looks. Like, you need to go right now. And as she's saying that, I see the truck my father-in-law's driving, and they're coming down the street. So I'm like telling them, I'm like signaling them to like, come on, like, hurry up. So I have my son now. They pull in. I like hand him over immediately to my husband. I like whip the door open. I hand him. I said, I need to grab. I don't know what I was thinking. I was like, I need to grab my shoes and his diaper bag, because his diaper bag had my wallet in it and like all our medical information and all that stuff. So I'm like, I don't know what was happening like in my head, but I'm like, and I didn't have shoes. I'm like, I'm not walking in a hospital without shoes. Like, and also we didn't know how serious this was. I just knew that like he wasn't breathing. Obviously that's very serious, but I'm like, let me just grab my stuff. Yeah. And it was right there. So I grab my stuff and I come back out and I hop in the back seat, and my husband, he has no idea what the hell's going on. All I said was, there's an emergency. You need to come now. So he's like holding him up in the front seat and just like, hey, like, wake up, come on, like, stay with us, wake up. And he's freaking out now. We're on the way to the hospital, and there's like, it's only like one turn. It's only like one set of traffic lights that you have to hit before you get to this hospital, and you have to turn left. And I remember we got to the left turn, and it was a red light. And I screamed at my father-in-law. I'm like, run through the red light right now. We need to get there. Like, cut everyone off. And like, he's the type of person, he's very like laid back and just like calm and quiet. So he's just like, I don't know what to do. And as soon as I'm like in the middle of like screaming at him, it turns green and he just like goes. But like, I felt so, like, I think about that all the time. And I'm like, I go up to him. Like, anytime I see him, I'm like, I'm so sorry for yelling at you. He's like, I really don't care. He's like, I understand.
Yeah.
So we get through the light and we get to the hospital. Like I said, it's like a 5-minute drive. And meanwhile, like, I'm like, you need to keep him awake, like our son. I was telling my husband about our son. I'm like, you need to keep him awake. Keep shaking him. I'm like, I don't care what you need to do. Keep him like somewhat like awake, because like I said, he'd like lift his head with his eyes closed and cry, and then it would just slump down and he'd be like limp. So I'm like, I don't even care. Just keep doing that. I don't care that he's crying. Crying is good because he's making noise. It means he's still breathing. Like, just keep doing that. So we did that the whole way to the hospital. And then my father-in-law pulled up to the emergency room. We hop out, and like I said, COVID is a thing. So like they're very strict about who's there and masks and all of that. We just bolt through all of the doors. We don't even go to the front desk. We just start screaming. My husband starts screaming. He's like, he's not breathing. We need help. So they must have seen us and been like, who the fuck are these crazy people? Because we just like bolted in like we were fucking breaking into the place. So they're like, a nurse was like right there, and she's like, oh, okay. And she like scans her little badge and like lets us back into like where the rooms are. Mm-hmm. And she like had us lay him down on the hospital bed. And at that point, like, I don't even remember like what was going on. I just remember like a million people rushed in. I don't even know who they were, what their job titles were, like nothing. And like they did a little finger thing and hooked him up, and it had like his vitals and stuff. Thank God I don't know what any of that meant at the time, because I'm sure the numbers were really low and really bad. And if I had known what they were saying, it probably would have like made me spiral, mm-hmm. just because of the state that he was in. But yeah, I guarantee like every hospital staff that was working in that emergency room then had been in that room. Like, that's what it felt like. And I had backed up and was letting them do their thing and like sat down. And then there was like one staff member being like, okay, like what happened? And I'm like, I don't know. He woke up from a nap. He wasn't breathing very well. And now we're here. Like, I don't know what happened. And then he's like, okay, well, he's like, did he fall or like get hurt or anything? I was like, no, like nothing happened. We had a normal day. Like, he's good. But they just kept asking, like, okay, like, are you sure he didn't fall? I'm like, no, like I said, like, the fall, the day before.
It just, like, didn't come to mind.
No, because it was such a normal thing. Like,
right.
Kids fall, they get up. Like I said, they get up and they're fine. But then I'm like, oh, I was like, well, when I found him up, like, when I found him, when he first woke up from his nap, he was, like, half rolled off of the couch. I'm like, but it didn't look like he had fallen far. Like, it was literally just, like, kneeling on the carpet. I'm like, and it's carpet, it's not hardwood. Like, he didn't hit anything. Like, I'm like, he might have rolled off the couch during his nap, but, like, it's not, like, the couch is very close to the ground. Like, it wouldn't cause anything. So in my mind, that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay. So I'm like, yeah, that he had that fall. Maybe that's it. And they were like, oh, okay. And I just, like, at that point, like, we didn't know the severity of it. So I just remember sitting in the chair and I'm like, thinking, I'm like, okay, well, like, we're in a hospital. They know what they're doing. They're going to make him better. And then we're going to go about our day. Like, I don't know what's causing this, but they're going to figure it out and they're going to help us and everything's going to be fine. So after, like, a few minutes of asking us just, like, basic questions about everything that had happened, they're like, okay, we're going to send him up to get a CT scan. It will be, like, a couple minutes, but we're going to go do that. You can't come with us because, like, only, like, certain people can go, like, in those rooms. So, like, you guys just wait here. We'll be back in a minute. So they go and do that. And then, like, I don't even remember who it was, but someone had come in and they're like, okay, let's go wait in the waiting room because, like, for whatever reason. They're like, let's just go wait out there instead of in here. So we go out to the waiting room and, like, in the waiting room, it's, like, the area where, like, it's, there's, like, the barrier. It's, like, a see-through barrier and there's a door and you need a badge to get into, like, the patient rooms. So we were, like, just in the regular waiting room area. There's people there. It's just a typical, like, emergency room, waiting room. And so I was sitting in the chair and my husband, I don't even know, like, what was going through his head, but he was just kind of, like, pacing. And all of a sudden we see them roll our son, because we can see that room that we were just in because it's right across from us. And we see them roll him in and they shut the curtains. And my husband, like, loses his fucking mind. And he's like, what are they doing with our son? Why can't we see him? Why won't they let us in there? Like, we need to go in there and see what's wrong. Like, what's going on? Screaming in this waiting room. And I don't know what to think. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, I'm literally, like, I just remember sitting there, like, staring at the ground, like, oh my God, like, I don't know what to do. So he's losing his mind. And one of the front desk ladies comes and she's like, sir, you need to calm down. If you don't calm down, I'm going to call security on you. He's like, fucking call security. I don't care. That, like, let us see our son. Something's wrong and they're not telling us what's wrong. Like, we're his parents. We need to figure out what's wrong. So obviously she calls security and the security dude comes and it's just like this wicked chill. He's like, hey, like, what's going on? And my husband, like, loses it. He's like, they won't let us see our fucking child. Like, what is going on? And he's like, hey, he's like, I'm sure there's a reason why. They're doing their thing. They're getting him help. He's like, you got to calm down, though. There's people in here who are, because there was, like, a full emergency, like, a full waiting room. So my husband's like, okay, fine. Like, I'll calm down. Like, whatever. So he's like, okay, like, cool. So the security guard just kind of hung out there. So that happened. So he calms down. And then they're like, we need to admit him to the hospital since he's being taken care of here and he had the scan. So he's like, so some lady's like, you need to come fill out all these forms. And I'm just like, my head is in the fucking clouds. I'm like, okay, like, I have all of our medical information and everything in, like, my little wallet. So I'm, like, right down the hall and I can, like, look to, it was, like, to my left and I could see the, like, where his room was. It wasn't very far. So she's asking me a million fucking questions and I'm like, I'm just, like, spitting out whatever I'm thinking. I'm like, when's his date of birth? What, all this medical information and all of this, like, insurance information. I'm like, I just threw the cards at her. I threw my wallet. I'm like, take whatever you need. I'm like, I don't know. She's like, okay, well, I need you to sign all these forms. And I'm literally signing and looking. to make sure like nothing's going on, because they're still in there with the curtain closed. So I'm just like signing whatever, and then one of the doctors, I guess, went up to my husband and was like, hey, we need to talk to you guys. And I'm like still signing stuff, and I didn't hear this, but my husband is like, hey, come over here, like they need to talk to us. And I told the lady that I'm like, I need to go right now. She's like, no, take your time, whatever. So I like threw the thing down, and I like go over, and it's like this little like not like a, it's like they have like the little the dividers, like a seat like this, and the dividers, and the person across from you, and it was some lady in like a doctor's outfit. She's like I need you guys to sit down. And I know from like movies and TV shows, like when they tell you to sit down, like something's wrong, like it's serious, it's bad. So I sit down, and my husband's like, no, like I'm not sitting down. He's like, just tell me, like, give us the news, like what's wrong. So I remember just sitting across from her, and she was like looking dead at me, and she's like, so we did a CT scan of your son. He has a fractured skull, and it's causing a brain bleed, and his brain is swelling up, and that's what's causing him to like go in and out of consciousness right now. She's like, we're not a children's hospital, so we're gonna call a med flight to get him over there because it's the fastest way. But she's like, we put him in a medically induced coma for right now because it's going to slow down the swelling, and it's not going to like hopefully slow it down and not make it worse. So like she's like, that's what we're doing right now. We called the med flight. They're on their way. They're like, but for right now, they're like, you're going to talk to the police officer. That's like, you need to go talk to him. And so I turn around, and there was a police officer right behind us. And so I was like, and like, so if I can like backtrack.
Yeah.
So like while she's telling me this, like I like my face was like literally just blank. I like had no emotion. I wasn't crying. I wasn't, literally just nothing. I just remember I was like leaning forward and just like staring at her like this while she's telling me. Like it didn't feel real, like at all. I'm like, this didn't happen. Like this wouldn't, like, couldn't happen to me. This couldn't happen to our son. Like, he was fine. He went and took his nap, and before that, he was fine. We were in the pool. Had breakfast. Like, everything was good. And now you're telling me, like, this is what's wrong. And I think the only thing I asked her, I'm like, is he going to be okay? And she was just like, I don't know. She's like, the brain is such an unknown thing. She's like, I can't tell you if he's going to be okay or not. She's like, I can't. She's like, I'd be lying to you. So I'm like, okay. So then she was like, yeah, you need to speak. You guys need to speak to the police officer or whatever. So I turn around, and there's a police officer just standing like right behind us. And he's like, okay, which statement am I getting first? And I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, I was like, me, I guess. Like, he's like, okay, let's step over here. Because at first I was like, oh, can we go with you together, like me and my husband? He's like, no, I need to just talk to you guys separately. So in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, like he's here because my husband was freaking out in the waiting room, and now we caused the scene, and people are probably complaining, and I'm like, they called the police on us because he like didn't stop, and that's what I was thinking. So I'm like, okay, great. So I go and he's like, okay, so like, tell me everything that happened. So I start saying like, oh, like, you know, they took him away, and he started freaking out, and he's like, no. He's like, what happened with your son? How did this happen? So I was like, oh. So I gave him the whole rundown, everything that happened. He woke up from his nap, wasn't really breathing. We came straight here. And he's like, okay, well, what caused him to be like this? And I'm like, I have no idea. We don't know. He was like, oh, okay. He's like, and that's it. So he's like, I'll talk to your husband now. And I'm like, oh, is that it? Like, what's going on? Like, why do you need this statement? And he kind of just sat there and sighed. He's like, okay, well, he's like, the doctor who did your son's CT scan had seen that there was past trauma on his right side of his brain. So we believe that this is a case of child abuse. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like never in my life did I think that I would ever be like accused of like child abuse. Yeah. Like, 'cause that's like not who I am. Like, that's not how I was raised. That's not how I'm like raising my kids.
It's also just surprising to me. I mean, I guess that's their job, but at the same time, it's surprising to me that that's where it would go so fast, I guess.
So that was like, besides finding out about my son and like, yeah, like we don't know if he's gonna be okay. Like now we think it's because of you. So the police officer tells me that, and he's like, yeah, they found past trauma on his right side because the fracture and the bleed were on his left side. So like we found past trauma on his right side. Not as severe, but like we see.
So the past trauma, they're saying they saw, like it was different than what was causing the bleed, or no?
No, they just said it looks like he had past head trauma before this incident.
Got it.
Like something had happened and it's healed now, but it left a mark. Is what they were essentially saying. Like so, and I guess that's how they determine if people are abusing their kids. Like it's I guess it's like a typical sign. Like like this has happened before, so we're gonna investigate now. And I'm like, oh my god, like I'm like, no. I'm like,
news to me.
That's we don't do that at all. Like I love my kids to death. I would never lay a hand on them like that. No. And I'm like, look, I'm like, we believe he has, and I had actually been mentioning this to all the people beforehand. I actually forgot to mention. We had mentioned that we were currently in the process of getting a diagnosis for CP. And I'm like, we've been seeing people, because we're not from here, obviously. We're in Texas, we're from New Hampshire. So completely new area. Like we don't know anything, anyone, nothing. So we're like, no, we're from New Hampshire. We're seeing people at Boston Children's. And we're like in the process of getting like a diagnosis of CP. And they're like, okay, well, we don't have a documentation for that right now, so yeah, we can't take your word for it, basically. And you don't have a diagnosis right now, so you're kind of shit out of luck. But we just kept like going over and over, like, no, like, listen, they believe this is what happened to him. Like, we're trying to get it figured out. We never got the MRI because it was pushed back. And they just like were not having it. He's like, okay, well, that's not what the doctor knows or sees. So we're just going based off of what he said. So I finished that up and I'm just like in complete shock. Because I'm like, first, they tell me like, yeah, we don't know if your son's going to be okay. And he has all of this trauma. And still, I have no idea why. I'm like, what the fuck happened? And now they're thinking that like we did this. Like, it was just like, I think I was just in so much shock.
Yeah, and it happened so fast.
So yeah, I brought him, so we got to the hospital around like 1:30. And then this had all unfolded within like an hour, I think. This was like 2:30, almost 3 o'clock maybe, like probably less than that. So this was all happened within like an hour of like stepping in there with him and them taking over. So he does the interview with my husband, and at that point, we had my father-in-law was actually in the parking lot in his truck, just like waiting to like see what happens. So at that point, he had come in and sat in the waiting room, and then he was in contact with my mother-in-law, so she had come to the hospital as well. And also our other son was at their house. My husband's uncle was there, like doing construction and stuff like on their house, so he was with our older son. So like he was good there. Like I can't even imagine bringing him to that situation. Like that would have been nuts. So yeah, he was there, he was good. So we were all there, all four of us were there. And then they're like, okay, the med flight is on its way. They're like gonna land, there's nowhere for them to land like on the roof, which I thought like every hospital had like a helicopter pad, or like the bigger ones at least. And it was a pretty like decent sized hospital. But I guess they like didn't. So they're trying to find a place to like set the hospital or set the helicopter down. Mm-hmm. And it just so happened to be like right outside in front. Like I could see it out of the window. So they landed there, they come in, and I guess they're like exchanging information with the staff there. So they come out to the waiting room and they're like, okay, they're gonna prepare him to be med flighted. You can come in and kind of talk with the people who are going to be on the med flight if you want. Just meet them and just kind of, I think that's what it was. So we're in the room with my son, and I'm just kind of sitting next to his bed, and they have him in a in a medically induced coma at this point. So, like, he's all hooked up. He has a tube down his throat. And, like, I don't even think I could even look at him. I know that sounds horrible, but, like, I just couldn't. Like, I was holding his hand, but, like, I just couldn't look at him. And I just remember talking to the guy who was going to be in the helicopter. I don't know what their title was. Like, the med flight crew. And they were, like, some of, like, the nicest people ever. They're like, hey, we're so-and-so. We're going to take really good care of him. It's going to be a safe flight. Like, you know, we'll keep him safe on the flight and we'll deliver him to the other hospital and he'll be fine. Not, like, fine in a sense that, like, you know, he's going to make it. But, like, he's like, we're going to do everything in our power to get him from this point to the other hospital and it will be a safe trip. And I'm terrified of flying. So I was just like, oh, my God, like, I'm like, you're taking my son and going, like, in a helicopter. Like, that's nuts. But we found out that we couldn't go. Because I thought that, like, one of us could go. So that's what I had said. I'm like, oh, can one of us go? And they're like, oh, like, they said that nobody can go and, like, it's just going to be us. There's not enough room. Like, with all of us and the equipment and him, there won't be enough room. So I was like, okay, that's fine. We'll just follow them there or whatever. So he's like, yeah, it's like a 10-minute med flight, and then we'll be there. He's like, let's exchange numbers. I'll call you when we get there, and when he's safe, I'll let you know that we got there safe. So I was like, okay. The med flight crew, they were so nice and so comforting. They're like, we're going to take great care of him. We'll get him there in no time. Like, you're good. So we exchanged numbers, and then I go back out to, like, where we were, and the police officer, he was still there the whole time. He's like, you guys can't go to the other hospital with him. And we're like, why not? He's like, well, we're taking this as an investigation right now because CPS is now involved, so you're technically being detained right now. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, right. I'm like, I'll sit in the back of your car. You can drive us there.
Yeah. You can watch us.
I'm like, we'll follow. You can follow right behind. Like, we're not going to go anywhere else. Like, right. what the hell? And that cop, like, I still think back to it. He was such an asshole. Mm-hmm. Not all cops are. I'm not saying all cops are, but he was.
Well, especially in that kind of situation, because it's like...
There was just no remorse for us at all. Like, I understand you're doing a job. Like, you're a police officer. Like, you can't really have that much emotion.
They could have let you guys in and then had you guys being watched or something.
Something like that, yeah. And I was just, like, beside myself. I'm like, oh, my God. So I said that. I'm like, you can follow us. I'm like, I'll even sit in the back of your car if you want me to. Like, just get us there.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, he'll be in surgery, so it's not like you'll be able to see him anyways. And I'm like, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
I'm like, God forbid something does happen. I'm going to be all the way across town. Like, and this was in Houston, Texas. And Houston's it was like the biggest city in Texas. And it's like a 30-minute drive. And that's like with or without traffic. Like, you don't know. So I'm like, what if something happens? Then what? Are you not going to let us go there? So he's like, no. He's like, you guys have to stay here until his boss comes. And he was like an investigator. He's like, you guys need to wait until he gets here. And he's going to ask you questions. And then you'll be free to go. So I'm thinking, okay, he's on his way. And I think he might have said that. Like, oh, yeah, he's on his way. He'll be here shortly. So I'm thinking, okay, like, they'll get him on the med flight. They'll get him into surgery, and then we'll be here for a little bit, and then we can just go. So we're, like, waiting, and as we're waiting, I forgot to say, like, the doctors came out, and they're like, okay, like, they're ready, the med flight crew is ready to take him. They're like, we'd like you to say goodbye right now, because we don't know if this is the last time that you're gonna see him alive. So they're like, why don't you say bye now, just in case this is, like, the last time. So, I remember I went first, and,
take your time.
So I remember going first, and they warned me. They're like, he's not gonna look like himself because he's, like, attached to all these machines, and he has a tube down his throat. But they're like, he's not feeling any pain right now, but just say bye, just in case. I remember going up to him, and it looked like he was just, like, sleeping. Like, he looked so comfortable, like, considering everything. And I just remember, like I just, was talking to him, and I'm like, you're gonna be okay. Like, everything's gonna be fine. And I remember purposely, like, I'm not gonna say goodbye. So I just remember, like, saying what I said, and And after, I was just like, I'll see you later. Like, I didn't want to say bye because I'm like, then, you know, I feel like mentally that would just, you know, I can't do that. Like, it's not goodbye. Like, you're going to be fine. They're going to take care of you and you're going to be fine. And so then my husband went, and then, like I said, my in-laws were there. So they went and said their thing. And then they rolled him out, and we could see them rolling him out to the helicopter because it was right there. So at this point, so after I know I'm kind of going all over the place.
You're okay.
But the police officer is like, hey, we're gonna put you, there's like a separate room from the waiting room. It's like probably like half the size of this room, and it has like chairs and like a bench or something, and there's like a privacy door. So he's like, you guys can stay in here while we wait, so you're not just waiting out here. So I remember going back into that room after they took him out. We saw them roll him out, and I just remember like standing at the window with my husband, and we were just like hugging each other. And we saw them like lift off and just go, and like that was it. And I just remember like hugging. Sorry.
No, you're okay.
I just remember hugging my husband and just turning to him, and I said, no matter what happens, like, I want you to know that I love you. Because I didn't know, like, I didn't know if we were gonna, like, lose our son that day, you know? So I'm like, I just wanted him to know, like, no matter what, whatever the outcome is, like, we need to be there for each other. Because, like, I can't do this alone. Not that I felt like I was going to, but, like, he never made me feel like that. But, like, I just had to say it out loud. And just make it, like, this is real. This, we could potentially not, like, have one kid after, like, the end of the day. So yeah. So that, I remember saying that to him. And, you know, he agreed. He's like, yeah. He's like, no. So we just need to be there for each other. No matter, like, whatever happens, we'll be okay. So I remember just sitting there and waiting and waiting and waiting. And I remember, like, I had to, like, get up and, like, use the bathroom. And, like, the police officer who was there was just, like, standing outside the door. Like, he was, like, guarding the door. Like, we were gonna break out of it. Like, it just felt so just, like, he made us feel like we were, like, criminals.
Yeah.
So I remember I was like, hey, I'm just gonna, like, go use the bathroom. He's like, yeah, sure, like, you can go. And then I just, like, I don't know if it's just, like, my personality or what, but, like, I just, like, I need other people's opinions. And so I like, asked him on my way back, I'm like, what do you think? I'm like, do you think he'll be okay considering everything, like, that's happened? And he was just like, I don't know. I'm like, but this stuff, like, happens, right? Like, I don't even, like, I brought up, like, athletes. I'm like, athletes get head injuries and then they, like, come back from it and they can still play, like, sports and stuff. And he's like, yeah, but that's, like, months of recovery and, you know, all this money to, like, get resources. And, like, it's not just, like, an overnight thing. Like, they're like, he's like, you'll be reteaching him how to do everything, to walk, to eat. Like, it's not going to be easy if he does make it. And I was just, like, thinking, like, what the I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, I'd rather him make it and have to reteach him everything than to lose him, you know? So I was like done talking to him. But, like, I don't know what, I think I was just grasping for something.
Yeah.
Like, I just wanted someone to be like, he's gonna be okay. But I just wasn't getting that. Like, everybody I talked to, they're like, we don't know. Like, we can't tell you. So I think it was like a few hours we were there. And meanwhile, we got the phone call, the med flight crew, he called me and he's like, okay, we're here. He's good. He's going into surgery now. But I just want to let you know, like, everything, he was fine during the flight. So I was like, okay, that's good. So he was in surgery, and I didn't know how long surgery was going to be. But, like, right after that time, the police officer was like, okay, my boss is here. He can, interview you guys one at a time. And this was probably like 2 or 3 hours after. So we've just been sitting in this room at this first hospital for hours waiting on this guy. Like, I don't know what they were thinking. So I go first, and it's just like some, like, old dude, you know, and he's like, okay, like, tell me your name, where you're from, or, like, where you live, and everyone that lives in the house where this happened. So I was like, okay. I was like, well, we're just visiting. We're from New Hampshire, but we're visiting my in-laws. we don't live here, we're just visiting. He's like, okay. But he's like, tell me everyone that lives in the house. He's like, just include you guys. So I start listing off everyone, like me, my husband, the kids. And I was like, oh yeah, and my husband's, or my father-in-law's grandma. He's like, okay, what's her name? And I like paused, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I don't even know her name. I'm like, this is the first time I ever met her. And like, I was introduced to her as Granny. Like, hey, this is Granny. And so I just start like laughing, and he's like, and he just like looks at me. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I don't know her name. And he's like, excuse me. I'm like, I just met her like 2 days ago. I'm like, I just know her as Granny. I'm so sorry. He's like, last name or anything? I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
And he's like, okay, we're just going to leave it at Granny. And I was just like, remember thinking like, oh my God, this guy thinks I'm an idiot because I don't know this lady's name. But anyways, so it was just the same thing. Like, do you remember him falling? What happened? How did you find him? And just everything from start to finish. And it was like being recorded. So we just go one by one. And I remember getting back to the room, and my husband had gone in, and I told my in-laws, I'm like, they asked me what Granny's name was, and I had no idea. And she's like, oh my God. She's like, don't worry about it. I'm like, and she told me her name, and I was like, oh my God, like, I'm an idiot. So we finally do that, and they interview my in-laws too, because at that point, which we found out later on, since they thought that it was child abuse, they thought that his parents, my in-laws, were like condoning the abuse and like weren't reporting it, or for whatever reason. So that's why they interviewed them too. So after that, they're like, okay, they're like, you guys are good to go. They're like, there's CPS people that are going to be on their way to the house. They want to take pictures. They want to interview your other son. Get all of the information they can from you guys. Like, they need to go and do that. So it was like a crime scene, basically, like taking pictures of everything. And because at some point in the mix, like when everything was going on, and I also forgot to say this, but when they kept asking us if he had fallen, and we were like, no, you didn't fall. Like, maybe he rolled off the couch during his nap. Like, all of a sudden my husband's like, oh my God, yesterday when he fell and I thought he hurt his arm, maybe he actually like hit his head. But he's like, he didn't grab his head. He didn't cry and complain about his head hurting. Like, showed no signs of like anything.
Right.
He's like, if anything, I thought he like hurt his arm. But he's like, maybe that was it. And they're like, okay, where did that happen? And so we told them it was like on the first step of their stairs going upstairs. And where he had fallen, it was on the left side of the staircase. So if you're looking up the stairs, it was the left side of the staircase. And we believe, because my husband was like right there, like he wasn't, I don't think he was like watching him like directly, but like it was like in his like vision, like right there. But my son had like taken the first step and went to go grab the railing or the banister with his left hand, which is his hand that he has trouble with. So we think that when he took that step and went to grab, his hand doesn't have the strength or the muscle to hold his weight up, and it slipped and he fell backwards.
Okay.
And where he fell, it's all tile. It's like the really hard, like real, like tile material, like not like hardwood, not carpet or anything. So like, I don't know if and that's like hard material. So like, yeah. So like, that was like one of the worst things you could fall on. So we had found out that's what had initially caused the fracture, which is nuts because like when you think about it, like he's a little 2-year-old, he fell probably not even a foot like backwards, but it was just like the way he hit his head.
Right.
Like you would think like something that crazy, like you'd fall like down the stairs or something like that. Like that's like an insane injury to have from just like falling down one step. So that was just like to figure out that that's the reason that caused it. Like that was just like crazy. Like thinking back about it, because we said, like when he fell, it wasn't a big deal. Like he cried, like it was like any other fall. Like, he cried and he got up and everything was good. And then we went about the whole like rest of the day.
Yeah,
like
and he was fine.
The day, the night, everything. So it was like, wouldn't we have known like immediately? And they're like, oh, well, sometimes, you know, it can take a while, but that's what caused it. But at the time, like, our heads were just spinning and we're just like, we didn't even think about it because it was like any other fall. So
especially too, because after he was like playing in the pool and like doing everything else.
And being so active and eating and doing everything that we would normally do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we determined is what caused it, or we think what caused it. So finally, we're done with the investigator there, and they're like, okay, you're good to go. Told us that CPS was going to be by to take pictures and talk to our other son and ask him questions and kind of, you know, I guess get a feel of
And how old was your other son at this time? Like 4?
He was 3.
Okay.
And
like, talk to him and like,
yeah, what is he going to say? You know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. And we weren't there when that happened. So what had happened was so we were getting ready to leave, and I remember the cop that was like an asshole. He was like, he's like, okay, but like make sure you don't speed on the way there. You know, we don't want to get a ticket. And I'm like, fuck you, buddy. I'm like, screw you. Like, we're gonna go however fast we want. Like, I don't even care.
So at that point, you're headed to the hospital, the other hospital,
so,
right?
For whatever reason, so we had the 2 cars there. I don't know why. I think I like I don't even know if I like needed like water or something. Like, I just needed like a snack. Like, I hadn't eaten anything the whole day. I'm like, let me just go, because the house was 5 minutes. So I'm like, let me go grab a snack and a water, and then we'll be on our way. So we do that, and we take my mother-in-law's car, and I remember plugging it into the GPS on my phone, and it was like, you'll be in there in like 30 minutes. And my husband, like, he's a car guy, so like he'll do whatever. And I don't know, this is like super illegal, but he drove like 120 the whole way there. And we were there in like 10 minutes.
There you go.
So I remember being, and so like we don't know where anything is. Like if this would have been Boston, we know our way around.
Right.
Just because we're in and out of the city all the time, just because like with appointments and that's where we work. So like we know the city, but this is a completely new place. So we have no idea where we're going. So we're coming up to the exit, and I'm getting a phone call, and it's from a Houston number. I'm like, oh my God, that might be the hospital. Like, holy shit, this is the call we've been waiting for. What's going to happen? So I answer it, and I'm trying to like look at the GPS, and my husband's like, where's the exit? And we're like going back and forth with trying to figure it out. And I have the phone on speaker. I'm like, hello. And they're like, oh, is this so-and-so's mother? I'm like, yeah. He's like, hi, I'm surgeon so-and-so. He's like, so he's out of surgery. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah, surgery went great. He's recovering in the PICU, which is the pediatric ICU. But yeah, everything went great. We fixed the fracture. And he's trying to explain to me everything that like he did in surgery. And I'm just like, that is when all of the emotions just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And like I burst into tears, and I was like, so he's okay? He's like, yep, surgery went great. I'm like, no. I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, in your own words, say he is okay. And he just kind of chuckled, and he's like, yes, he is okay. And that's when I was like, oh my God. Like,
you could breathe.
Yeah. Like,
how long was surgery? Do you know?
A few hours.
Okay.
Because they had probably taken him at the med flight probably around 2:30. So he probably got into surgery around 2:30, 3 o'clock-ish. And by the time we got to the second hospital, it was like between like 6 and 7. So a few hours. So there was that whole few hours where we didn't know what was going on. Like they said that they made us say goodbye at the other hospital. So yeah. So when he said those words, like, he is okay, I like broke down. I'm like, oh my God, like this is, I knew, like, I just like, I had a feeling. I'm like, he's gonna be okay. He's gonna make it. So I'm like, okay, now that we know he's okay, let's take the steps to like make sure he stays okay. And like, you know, because we didn't know how, like, what recovery was gonna be. And that's with every patient who has a brain injury. Like, you don't know what recovery is gonna be like. It could take a week, it could take months, it could take years, they could just never be the same. Like, you don't know. So finally we got to the hospital because we were like 2 minutes away, and we ran up there. And I remember like I said, this is still COVID, so like, put your masks on. And I'm like, fuck you, like, going up. So we get up there, and I remember there was this guy like just chilling like in the waiting room of the PICU, and he like looked like really out of place. And I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing? But they're like, so we gave the people our son's name, and they're like, okay, yeah, he's in this room. So I remember they opened the doors because, like, again, it's like you need a key to get into the patient rooms. And they opened the door and we're walking down the hallway and we're like halfway down and I heard him cry. And like in my mind, I was just like so happy because I'm like, that means he's okay. And like I was so happy to hear him cry. So I just started crying again and I ran into that room and there was like a nurse next to him and she's like, oh, like you're okay, like trying to calm him down. Meanwhile, like this is the first time I'm seeing him after surgery. So his head is all wrapped up in a bandage and like I can't see like really his eye, like, or it didn't cover his eyes, but like it was all over his head and it just like didn't look like him. But I just remember I heard him cry and I went over to the other side of the bed and just held his hands. I'm like, Mom is here, like you're okay. And I think he like heard my voice and he had calmed down and was just like resting. And I was just like hysterical. And I remember the nurse was like she obviously didn't know what we had gone through earlier. So she's like, oh no, this is completely normal. He's waking up from anesthesia. Like it can be like a really like, what's the word? It's like to transition to being like awake. Like it's kind of, it can be rough. Mm-hmm. So she's like, you know, he might be a little upset because of that. And I'm like, no, like it's okay. Like I'm so glad he's crying. And she's like, oh, okay. Like, I'm like, I don't even care. Like, I'm just glad that I can hear his voice again, even if it is him crying. But it was really nice to like talk to him. And like, I just like saw him calm down. So I was like, okay, like this is okay. And the staff there, not that the staff at the other hospital was like rude or anything. They were just like, we don't know what's gonna happen. They were just kind of up in the air. Like we're kind of walking on eggshells right now because we don't know. And meanwhile, they thought that it was like child abuse too. Right. So they're like, we don't know really how to respond to you guys. But at the children's hospital, it was like a night and day difference. Like they were so warm and welcome to us. They're like, he's doing great. His recovery has been great. Like, you know, the surgery went amazing. Like you guys have like one of the best surgeons in the country. Like you're really lucky that this had happened when it did. So that was nice. And then like some doctor came to talk to us and we were explaining to her, we're like, look, we believe he has cerebral palsy. They're thinking, they called CPS on us because they think this is like the stuff from the CP is what.
So that's what I was going to ask you. That first fracture that they were seeing.
So it wasn't even a fracture. Okay. It was coming up as plot twist. He had a prenatal stroke and does have cerebral palsy.
Okay.
What had happened was when he did have the stroke, part of his brain on his right side is it didn't develop fully.
So that's what they were seeing.
There's extra fluid there.
Okay.
So all they were seeing was fluid.
Got it.
They didn't know if it was blood. They assumed it was blood.
Okay.
So they were like, okay, if there's blood in the brain on that side, then there was some sort of
injury. Got it.
So that's what they had seen. Okay. So they just saw the extra fluid. And they believed
that was
it was
from
blood.
The CP.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we were explaining to that doctor there, and she's like, okay, like, you know, I understand, but, you know, they're just trying to do their job and just kind of do what they say. But she was very, like, much more comforting, like.
Yeah.
So the guy who was in the waiting room before, who I was like, he looks really out of place. They're like, oh, someone from CPS is here to talk to you guys. Because up until this point, we hadn't talked to anyone from CPS. We had just talked to the police.
Yeah.
So they're like, he just wants to talk to you one-on-one, like one at a time. So I go first, and wicked nice guy. We sit down in a room. He has a recorder, and just the same thing. Tell him everything that happened and all that. And then he shuts the recorder off. And I'm just like, look. I'm like, I know there's people out there who do this to their children, but I'm like, I can 100% tell you, like, I am not that person. We are not those people. Like, this is just like a huge misunderstanding, like where he has like a diagnosis that we're trying to confirm. Like this, it's completely not right. Like I understand you're doing your job, but like we aren't those people. Like, yeah. And I remember him just sitting there and he was just like shaking his head. He's like, I can tell you from doing this job, like through and through, like all the time. He's like, I interview hundreds of people a day, like just talk, like, or whatever. I interview a bunch of people. He's like, I can't say for certain, but he's like, I don't think you have anything to worry about, like, from hearing your story. And I was just like, holy crap. I'm like just hearing that, not that I had anything to hide, obviously, but like when they tell you, like, yeah, you're under investigation for child abuse, like, it just like, when you like, you know that you don't do that, like, it was just insane to me. Like, I couldn't wrap my head around it. Like, so for someone from that side of it being like, I kind of know what to look for, and I can tell when people are lying and all this. He's like, he's like, let them just do their investigation. But he's like, I really don't think you have anything to worry about. So I was like, okay, like a breath of fresh air. I'm like, okay, like, that's good. Which we were very like cooperative. We gave them everything, our information, answered all their questions. So like we did all we could.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if they could believe whatever they wanted. So, but like in my mind, I'm like, I know I'm not that person. So, but anyways, so that happened. So I go back to the room and he interviews my husband. He comes back, and since it was still COVID, they're like, yeah, we're only allowing one visitor at a time, so one of you is gonna have to leave. And I'm like, great. So my husband decided he'd be the one to leave, and I stayed there the whole night. I don't think I slept. I just sat there and I watched my son, and I held his hand the whole time. And I just like went over everything in my head, like, of the day. I'm like, that was like the craziest day I've ever had in my entire life. I'm just glad it ended with like this. And so that morning, I remember they came in, they did his vitals, and they're like, okay, we're going to take his wrap off. And they took it off, and I like saw his head for the first time, and it was just like a shock because it happened on his left side. So he has a giant scar that goes from like the top of his head to like right in the middle of his ear. And obviously they had used stitches. So like when they took it off, all I saw was like a bald head and a scar. And I just like remember crying, and I'm like, oh my God, like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this is what my son looks like, and I let this happen, you know? So that was really upsetting to see, and I'm like, I cannot believe that he's going to have this scar for the rest of his life over something so small, you know? So, but I was just like, you know, the alternative would have been worse. So I'm like, I'm just glad and all that. And it was, he looked so funny because like he had all that and they only shaved like part of his head. So it looked like he was like balding on this side because they did like the whole like only shaved like a little bit. So he had like a little patch of hair right here for a while. So that was just funny. But yeah, so he had that. And then they let me hold him for the first time. And he was still connected to everything, but it was just really nice to be able to hold him. And then earlier that morning, my husband came, and we switched roles. I went home and I took like a nap, and he was there. And while he was there, you know, our son, he woke up, he was alert, he was starting to eat, he was drinking. They didn't want him to like walk yet, because like I said, with that type of injury, like you don't know how they're gonna react. But they're like, no, he's showing signs that he wants to do things, like that's really good.
Yeah.
And this is only like not even a day post-surgery, so like that's really good. So he stayed there. How long did he stay there for? I think he stayed the whole day and maybe the night to like give me the day to rest, I think, because I was there, like I hadn't had a break. So I think he stayed there the whole day, and by that evening he was sending me videos of him walking, and he was holding his hand, and he was just like, not like 100%, but like he was walking.
Yeah.
And like I couldn't even believe that like not even 24 hours ago he had emergency brain surgery and now he's walking. Like that's incredible. Like I thought he wasn't going to be able to walk for months. Like
right.
That's what they made it seem like. So then the next day, so he stayed the night, and then I went in the morning, and he wasn't in the ICU anymore. He was in like the regular unit, so he wasn't under like intensive care anymore, which was good. They're like, he's breathing on his own, like he's showing signs of improvement, like he's good. Like we don't need to monitor him 24/7. So I was there, and we were only there for like half a day. And then the doctor on call was like, yeah, like you guys can go home. And I was just like scared because I'm like, oh my God, like this crazy thing just happened, and they're like giving us the okay to go home now. Like, I don't know. It was just so weird because like when you think of someone having that like intense like surgery, like I don't know. I didn't expect him to be like good to go 2 days later.
Yeah.
Not even 2 days. And so yeah, we went home and they're like, okay, you're just gonna have to like make sure like he takes it easy. You're gonna have to watch him, let him relax and all that. And like, let me tell you, it was the exact opposite. Like, I was chasing after this kid. Like, he would run laps around the house. Like, I didn't let him. Like, I was holding his hand, but I'm like, dude, you need to like slow down. Like, let's chill out. And like, I have videos and stuff of just him like playing with his toys and like acting like how he did before.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really good to like know that like he was the same kid that he was before this, and like he was just like so happy and just.
And did they give him the diagnosis there for the CP, or you didn't get it till after?
No, so they were only concerned about the fracture and everything. At that point, they're like, we don't know any of his past history because they didn't have that at that point. So like, we don't really know.
Yeah, they were like, we'll just address this.
Yeah. And the whole time we're like, here's their contact information in Boston. Like, please call them. Like, they'll let you know that we've been seeing them and trying to get this figured out. I think they eventually did, but at that point we were already back home. So yeah, so the whole recovery thing, like he needed like that few days to recover and he was good to go.
But he was fine, like there was nothing.
Fine, nothing, no concerns, like nothing.
Or anything.
No. It was like he had that and then he just like got up
bounced
and just
back, yeah. That's amazing.
And they even told me that at the hospital. They're like, honestly, like it's horrible that this happened to him. But at the same time, like, at his age, at being 2 years old, they're like, kids are like rubber. Mm-hmm. Like, they're meant to, like, fall down and get back up and be fine. They're like, if he had been any older, like a teenager or an adult, it could have been, like, a worse outcome. Yeah. Just because at his age, the bones aren't all fused together. So that it's more, like, resilient to, like, fixing themselves. Yeah. So they're like, even though it sucks that it happened, it's really good that like it happened at this age because it was a lot easier. So yeah, recovery was great. Eventually we got to go home back to New Hampshire, and I think it was probably like a few months later we were able to go get an MRI finally. So we do that, we get that MRI, and then we have to wait a little bit to get results. They can't give it to us right away. And I think a few weeks later I was on like a Zoom call with the original doctor who had told me she thought it was CP. And, like, sure enough, she's like, yep. She's like, it's showing that he did have the prenatal stroke and that he does have cerebral palsy. And, like, that's what that marking is. And that's what they saw. Okay. So I was like, holy shit. I was like, thank God. I'm like, I knew, like, obviously I knew, like, I'm not that type of person to do that to a child. So, like, just to, like,
but know. But it gives you that explanation of, like, okay, well, what was that? You know what I mean?
And it's just, like, it, like, hit me so hard because, like, I had to go through so much shit at that hospital with the doctors, the police, the CPS. And I was just, like, begging them. I'm like, look, I did not do this. The timing was horrible. Oh, my God, I know. It was, it added just so much stress. Yeah. Because if we had that initial MRI... And let's say we got that MRI and we knew he had the CP, and then the fall had happened and we explained that, I don't know how it would have gone. Like, I really don't like to think about the what ifs, but like, I feel like it would have gone a lot more smooth and differently, I guess. And then she also said, she's like, oh, by the way, she's like, I just want to let you know, obviously we saw the mark on his left side where he had the fall. She's like, I don't know if they let you know this, but he doesn't have any signs of brain damage whatsoever. She's like, all we see is like the crack that was there or whatever. I don't know what she saw. Yeah. But she's like, obviously she saw something, but she's like, yeah, she was like, there's no brain damage whatsoever. She's like, I don't know if they told you that, but just to kind of give you a peace of mind, I was like, well, thank God. I'm like, they didn't say like he did or he didn't. Right. But it was just really good to know that like there was no damage there. And I do remember when the surgeon was like talking to me over the phone, I actually got like a more clear answer afterwards when I had calmed down. So to fix the fracture, they actually used titanium. And like when he said titanium, I'm like, they put like a titanium plate in his head? I'm like, what the heck? But he explained it. It's like, no, it's like this like mesh, like very granulated like mesh material. And it's titanium, and they just kind of filled in the blank space. They're like, yeah, we cut that piece of his skull out because it was cracked. Wow. And just filled it with that.
It's amazing what they can do.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so now he just has no side effects of that, and like all he has from that is just the scar. Mm-hmm. And even like with his hair grown out, like you can't really see it. Even still, like, I mean, who cares? Like, it's a horrible, like, tragic story, but at the same time, it's like, you know, people see it and they're like, oh, like, what happened? And, you know, we get to share it. So, I don't know.
And then as far as the CP goes, you said that's just something that with, I guess, time, you can kind of, like, improve as he gets older?
So you can't, so with CP, there's no cure, so you can't 100% cure it. But then also it's not progressive. So all you can really do is strengthen that muscle. So his weak spots are like his fine motor skills, and it's all like in this place. So like these 3 fingers are what he struggles with. So he goes to occupational therapy. He doesn't do physical therapy because he doesn't need it because it's more so the fine motor skills. So he does that once a week, like outpatient. He does it in school. He also does speech because with the CP comes a little bit of like a speech delay and like speech impediment. So like I can understand what he's saying, and he gets better like every week. I swear to God. So like whatever we're doing is like improving, and we still go to Boston every now and then. Like he sees we have a neurologist now. We see him 2 times a year. They're great. We see their therapists there, and they're like, yeah, as long as you keep up with everything, they're like, he'll strengthen that hand and he'll be good.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it's good to like everything that he went through and still goes through. It's just good to know like where he is now. Like he's just shown so much improvement, and yeah, I don't know. I'm just really proud of him. He's a really brave kid. So
and I mean, like you said too, it you know, I feel like it's very easy to think, oh, this won't happen to me.
So a few years ago, he had a seizure for the first time. He had never had one before, and we're like, what the hell? And so it happened twice. Or it happened first time, and I told the neurologist.
Those are scary too.
It happens in his sleep too. So he had woken. So what happened was, and we got really lucky. He had woken up in the middle of the night and wanted to lay in our bed because that was very normal for him. He did that. He laid down. And then I felt like him moving, and I was like, what the hell is that? And I turn over, and he's shaking, and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, he's having a seizure, because I've never seen a seizure in person. And so I wake my husband up, we call 911, we get him to the hospital. It only lasted like less than a minute, and he like bounced right back. And I was like, what is going on? Like, what is wrong? So we bring him to the hospital, and so I called his neurologist, and the neurologist is like, if it happens again, we'll put him on medication. But he's like, I don't want to start medication because once you start it, you can't stop. So he's like, this could be just like a one-time fluke thing, or it could continue on. He's like, if it continues, then we'll take measures and give him medication.
And so he had another one.
Yep, so he had another one while we were on vacation. I don't know what it is with him when we go away and stuff happening. But we were like with family again. But he was sleeping in our bed that night, and he had another one. So I called the neurologist immediately, and then he's like, when you guys get back, we'll start him on medication. And he was good that was 2 years ago. He was good for 2 years. And he had another one a few months ago. Same thing in his sleep. My other son actually came in and woke us up and was like, because they share a bedroom, and he must have heard something. And he came and he's like, there's an emergency. Like my older son, he is a saint. Like he is like, oh, he's so good. Like, I love him to death. But, yeah, so he helped out a lot with that. But we figured out that his, we hadn't updated his, like, dosage for his medication yet. So he had gained so much, like, not so much weight, but, like, over the 2 years, the dosage that he had was too low.
So do they know what causes the seizures?
We don't know. It just happens in his sleep. We don't know if it's from the CP or the TBI, the traumatic brain injury.
And is there any way that they can...
We did a sleep study, but only one that was like, it was like an hour long. So I had to keep him up for like a really, really long time, and then put him to bed at the hospital, and they put like all the things on his head. And it came back normal. So they're like, okay. But I have an appointment later on this month with the neurologist, and because he had actually 2 seizures a few months ago. And when I read up on it, like that, I guess it's normal. Like if you don't have a seizure for a long time, you'll have that initial one. And then we upped his dosage, obviously. And then he had like some like fluke one, like a week later. So, But since then, that was in September, so he hasn't had one since.
So you're kind of still in the process of like figuring
that out.
Yeah,
so I think I'm going to ask about doing like an extended sleep study.
Okay.
Because I think they happen at the same exact time. And it's like really early in the morning, like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
So I'm assuming it might be something, and I mean, I'm not a doctor. So I think maybe it has something to do with like his sleep cycle. Like maybe he hits a certain point in his cycle and it causes a seizure, but I don't know.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. But other than that, like besides the seizures, like there are no side effects. Like he lives his
best life. Yeah.
He does.
That's amazing. Yeah, but no, like I was saying before, I think it's a good testimony because like you said, you know, a lot of people can hear these different stories or these things and think like, wow, that's crazy or that's scary, but like, you know, you don't think it would happen to you.
No, never.
And sometimes it's not something that you see, and it just goes to show that like it's something that can, your life can change within the matter of minutes or seconds, and it's terrifying. And I think that it just goes to show that it really can happen to anybody. And even just, like I was saying before, there's been a good amount of people on this show that also talk about how important it is to speak up when you feel like something's wrong, even if doctors say, oh, no, everything's fine, or oh, it's not this. Like, not saying that Google is always right either, but if you have a gut feeling that something's wrong, definitely listen to it.
And it's crazy because you hear it all the time.
Right.
Like, everything, like when people have these stories and these get into these situations, it's always after the fact, like, damn, I should have looked more into it. I should have done this. I should have done that. And it's like, I mean, nowadays, that's exactly what I do. If I feel uncomfortable about something or think something's off or don't think that I got the right information, I'll look elsewhere. Yeah. Like, I'm not playing around anymore.
Right. Get the second opinion, third opinion, do what you have to do.
I don't even care.
Right. No.
I don't care if you're offended. I do not care. I'm like, the safety of, like, myself and my kids is, like, what's important.
And I think, too, that's what people sometimes worry about is, like, oh, I don't want to look crazy or or overstep, because like if you're not a doctor, obviously like you don't have the education,
like
so
they're the professional.
Exactly,
that's what they
it's better it's better to speak up and look like the crazy person, because then at least you know that you're fighting for what you feel is right and what's going on in your gut. But you did amazing, seriously.
Thanks.
And I'm so happy that he's okay. And that's even the situation that you were talking about, like with the police and stuff, that's like a whole nother thing that
it just added to it.
Right.
Like, I'm already in shock about like almost losing my child, not knowing, and now you're throwing this on top of me.
And that's the thing, like I get that people have to do their job too, but it's like, can we like, there's a time and there's a place. And like, can you like wait a second?
We're human beings. Like,
right. Like, can you wait until at least after everything happens to see, so that you guys know he's okay and everybody can just like calm down?
Yeah.
So I feel like it's also not a good time to question somebody.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
But
I don't even know what I looked like to those people. I probably was as pale as a ghost and literally
just trying to like
emotion.
get through it. So, but no, you did such an incredible job, and I'm so grateful that you wanted to come on and share your story. Seriously, it's important.
It's very therapeutic for me to like speak it. I remember after the fact, I had gone to therapy like a year later, and I couldn't even get through it without crying.
It's heavy. It's a lot.
I couldn't, and it was like almost like after that therapy session and getting it out for the first time, really like start to finish with someone. It was almost like I was like, okay, like I can talk about this now, and like I can be okay talking about it. And the fact of knowing that he is where he is now and today, like, and he's okay, like, I can speak about it and make other people aware of, like, if you think something's wrong, say something,
Yeah. And it's important, too, because, even if something, we know these terms for different things, like, for example, the CP, but obviously there's not enough. Like, I know that there's knowledge about it, but clearly,
no, that's okay.
Clearly, there wasn't enough for a doctor to know right away. Like, and
so
it's
obviously that's not his specialty.
Right.
But send me to someone who does have that specialty.
Yeah, for sure. Or if somebody is concerned, be like, look, I don't think it's this, or I don't know, but like, if you want another opinion, do this. But it does go to show why it is so important, like I said, to speak up and to kind of do the extra research. Even if you don't find the right answers, it's a
step in the right direction, though.
For sure. So, but thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
You did
much.
incredible, really.
Thank you.
Great job. Is there anything else you wanted to add, or you think you got it all?
I would say what helps, just like to finish off, but like what I do now, like I think it's really good to like join support groups. I'm part of like a bunch of support groups on Facebook, and I follow people who actually live with CP, like they're adults now. And it's just really like comforting to see them like living their life the way they do.
Right.
And like showing that like you can live a normal life with CP and like be okay.
Yeah.
So it's like as a parent with a child with that, like it's very comforting knowing that like he's gonna be okay as well.
Yeah, and I think it opens you up too to more knowledge and information.
Definitely.
You can never have too much, you know? So that's amazing.
Absolutely.
And that being said, if you have any resources or anything of the sort that you want me to include in the description, feel free to send it over and I'd be happy to put it in there for people.
I don't think I have like, I just have like support groups that I personally follow.
Got
I mean,
it.
They're all out there. Not every one of them is public. Like you have to fill out like
information.
You have to like know someone with CP or you have it yourself. Okay. But I'm part of both. Okay. So it's really good to just kind of.
Yeah, just so people know that they're out there for sure.